What is up, guys? This is Chandler from Team No Leek. I'm here with my buddy Kobe Harris, who is also on Team No Leek, and we are doing our first ever podcast for the Team No Leek. Um, we're here to talk about the Unbroken Bonds format and how the cards coming out of it affects the meta, and kind of some decks and top picks that we're picking from the set itself. So, just gonna hop right into it. Our top picks for the Unbroken Bond format is Reshizard, possibly BDIF, Zoroark GX with the inclusion of Slowking, Dugong, and Persian, Baby Blounds, Pikarom, Malamar, Zapdos, the single prize Dark deck if you guys have seen it around, Blounds, Buzzwole Pheromosa, Honchkrow, Spread, and Stall. And we will go into more detail about each one of those. First, we're going to start with Reshizard, which Kobe and I have kind of came together and kind of considered that the possible BDIF of this format. So we'll go ahead and have Kobe hop in and see what he thinks about it.
Yeah, guys, we'll just jump right in. Reshizard's a really powerful, overwhelming archetype that can just kind of steamroll games like we're used to Pikarom doing in this format, but with a little bit higher of a damage cap and a little bit easier to reach that. So Reshizard has a lot of cool tools right now that it can use, such as Welder, Fiery Flint, Fire Crystal, and Kiawe, to make it really go fast and be able to pop off turn one. Right now, I'm not completely sold on what the best secondary Pokemon would be, whether it's Volcanion or something like Salazzle to give it extra draw. I don't know if you have any opinions on that.
I was actually going to talk about the weaknesses. My only thing with Reshizard is if you get Marshadow and you just get into a dead hand full of cards you don't want, Welder isn't going to do a whole lot for you in that sort of situation. You draw 4, and you just have a dead hand, and what does Reshizard do at that point?
Right, we've already seen how clearly powerful Let Loose can be in a format, just dominating games and really putting your opponents back early. I mean, if you're playing Reshizard, you could get Let Loose into a hand turn 1 that can just be completely unplayable for a lack of draw support. Later in the game, I think something like Salazzle could help carry that with its extra draw power, getting you into those welders that you might need to play every turn.
Absolutely. But, just touching on it again, I just don't think welders are enough after Let Loose. I think Salazzle, like you were saying, is kind of going to be its saving grace for the Marshadow plays. Salazzle's very strong. They said, Zoroark's busted, let's give you something more busted. So, Salazzle's probably, like I said, it's only saving grace for that Marshadow play. Moving on, or looking at the Japanese tournament, that was the most recent one, and seeing the show out of Reshizard in that tournament seems pretty significant. It took most of, top 16, right?
Yeah, most of top 16 and pretty much all of top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, with some of these Reshizard lists, I'm seeing a lot of high Kiawe and Welder counts, and really no extra supplemental draw to get into them, not even really a ton of Pokegears. So, I mean, you're kind of just praying that you draw into your Welders. I mean, you have your Dedenne GX, which is obviously a very impactful card, gets you into your Welders turn in and turn out, but, I mean, you only have one of those, and they're not going to get you out of even a second Let Loose.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at this list now here on Limitless, and I don't really see Salazzle. It could be just because it wasn't maybe a tech option at that point, or however it goes. But if decks aren't playing Salazzle and they're doing Reshizard, Wacky Schmacky could become a thing again. With all those basics and not a whole lot to handle it, I do see a Flareon GX here.
Also, don't forget about Bronzong that can be teched into some wall decks. That just if we pull it up here, read exactly what the Bronzong does.
Here we are. I think it's... And, pairing that with possibly Melmetal for a stall deck again could be a viable option that Kobe and I were actually discussing against the Reshizard heavy meta that we expect to see.
Give me just a quick second while I pull up this Bronzong. What set it's from.
previous set was it?
I want to say probably Team Up.
Here we go. So its ability reads, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon. Its attack, which is pretty well going to be useless if we use it as in a metal stall deck paired with Lucario Melmetal. It does 70 damage for a metal and a double colorless, and your active Pokemon is now confused.
Yeah, so if you guys are looking for kind of a different tech to deal with Reshizard and a different deck that can maybe handle it, you might want to check out the Melmetal deck with Bronzong to really boost your gameplay against Reshizard. Another thing I would note, though, is that the Turtonator that can be seen popping up in Reshizard lists is a Dragon type, so you might not want to just rely only on the Bronzong for that Reshizard matchup.
Yeah, I forgot about that Turtonator being a Dragon type. That's a very, very good point. Moving on from Reshizard, one of our picks was Zoroark for one of the top few decks that we see coming out of Unbroken Bonds. Staying consistent, Zoroark's always something that we've seen. Always been a consistent deck, always been a good deck. Who, no matter pretty much who you pair it with, the partners for Zoroark have become. There's new ones. There's Persian. Is it Slowbro or is it Slowking?
It's a Slowking.
Slowking. I think Slowking is a very, very good partner for Zoroark coming out. You have that triple acceleration energy to attach to it now. Its attack is 3 colorless. You just attach it to Slowking and you pretty much knock out a Reshizard with more than 4 energy, I believe.
Yeah, I think a Zoroark deck could be really powerful with these water techs to kind of supplement your damage against Reshizard while still pairing it with something like Lycanroc to take down your Pikarom matches. And just generally, Lycanroc is an insane card, so...
Yeah, and you still have that option to Lycanroc's GX attack, which is extremely viable in all formats, really.
One of the only things that I'm kind of worried about is with all these Stage 1 techs that I've never really preferred in Zoroark. I haven't really loved the Lucario. I haven't really loved the Weavile, so I've kind of just played the straight Lycanroc version in the past, and adding in all these Stage 1 lines, could get a little inconsistent maybe.
And that's where you might consider, Kobe and I have tested Zoroark quite a bit, and lots of variants of Zoroark. And I seem to always throw Magcargo in mine. That could be something that could be an option. It might get in the way of your Ditto plays, and it might get in the way of your Slowbro plays. But if you're looking for your Persian in some games, it could be a viable option. It's gonna take out your Slowking, option, but that could be something with how many Stage 1s you're running. Something you think about.
Yeah, honestly, right now I just think it's really important to decide what you're going to tech for with Zoroark. I think the fire decks are right now going to be #1 priority, so really you need to decide between Reshizard and Baby Blounds what you want to tech for. There is the Dugong that for 3 colorless does 60 to 2 things, setting up really great math for Baby Blounds, but kind of falling short a little bit on Reshizards. You can't fit everything, so I mean, maybe you test and see if Muck can go. Maybe you test and see if Persian is unnecessary. But I definitely think a water tech is going to be essential right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That Slowking almost has to go into Zoroark at this point. If we believe that Reshizard is going to be a meta-heavy deck, like I said, like we think it is. Reading Persian, though, its ability is Catwalk once during your turn before you attack. If your GX or EX Pokemon was knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack during their last turn, you may search your deck up for 2 cards and put them in your hand. Then shuffle your deck. You can only use 1 Catwalk ability during your turn. So it's pretty much, if you guys are familiar with Teammates, back in the old format, I guess it's XY, yeah. It's pretty much just a Teammates, but as an ability, which is kind of busted.
Yeah, that can even be used maybe in supplement of the Magcargo, since it does have some actually decent attacks. Its first attack revenge does 10 and then 20 more for each Pokemon in their discard pile, maximum up to 9 Pokemon. So it can hit 190 and even up to 220 if you get a choice band on it. And remember, with triple acceleration coming out, these attack costs can be manageable.
And that's a good point. You would not really need the Magcargo at that point. You would just, slap it on, because we see a lot of these Zoroark decks now putting the Meowth with the Persian. So that would be quite a viable option. Just using the Persian to get what you need as opposed to a Magcargo, and then pretty much getting the job done with Slowking if you need it. Um, can you keep consistency?
We'll just go ahead and move on from Zoroark. We all know Zoroark enough now. Baby Blounds, a new archetype coming out. The card is insanely strong and insanely aggressive, but my concerns with it is that it could lose steam over the course of a game. It's high energy attack costs, and it's high energy discard for the attack's actual effect. Makes it a really costly Pokemon to keep trading with things like one prizers. Yeah, so here we go. The card has 120 HP. It is a Fire-type Ultra Beast. Its first attack for 1 fire does 10 damage. Flip over one of your face-down prize cards. If it's a fire energy, the attack does 50 more damage. We're really not going to be using this much apart from the first turn, really, if we don't hit our Welder plays. It could come in and donk some Zorwas, some Rockruffs with 60 HP, but other than that, it's really not going to be doing a whole lot. What we're really concerned about is this Fireball Circus. 50 damage for each fire energy card in your hand. It's a strong attack with an unlimited damage cap.
Now, do we see this Blacephalon? I haven't read a whole lot into this Blounds list, honestly, just because I'm not very interested in any Blounds deck, personally. Do we see this Blounds deck possibly paired with Salazzle? And do we also possibly see this Blounds with, I'm assuming we see it with B-String as well?
Yeah, of course you're going to have to play B-String to get over that playing Welder turn in, turn out. Because Welder, while it's a great card, it's going to be near impossible to chain 3 times in a row. Salazzle can help with that, but really you don't want to be discarding a ton of energies in the first place, and Salazzle discards quite a bit of energies.
And that's what I was about to say. The only reason I would see Salazzle played in the deck is to maybe try to put more fire energy in your hand and then maybe get, is it Fiery Flint that brings it back from the discard?
No, that'd be Fire Crystal.
Fire
Fiery
Crystal.
Flint gets it back from the deck.
Yep, my apologies. But yeah, we could, that's the reason I thought, it could be a viable option in Blounds.
Yeah, for sure. Another way I'm seeing it built would be with a green search engine, just the 4 baby Blounds and the Blacephalon GX, searching out your B-Strings, searching out your Welders, getting you set up consistently with things like Unmanned Power Plant to kind of just slow down other decks while you just punch them in the mouth every turn.
So moving on from Baby Blounds, we're going to move on to Pikarom. Our biggest question is, can it keep up with this new format? Can it keep up with Reshizard that's, smacking you for, what is it, 230?
230 and then
every
260
turn?
with a choice band, yeah. Honestly, I really don't think Pikarom can. Reshizard has an incredible 270 HP, which takes 4 damage modifiers for Pikarom to full blitz. And while you may be able to get a cheeky knockout with your GX attack, other than that, you probably won't be able to set up too much more before they can punch 2 of your Pikaroms in the face. A tech I've been considering for Pikarom has been Aether Paradise. I prefer Viridian in general to give the consistency boost, but that effective 270 HP that it would give Pikarom could be super important against Reshizard.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. It's just, its full blitz only does 150. It's just not enough to keep up with Reshizard. With Reshizard's Welders and its attachments and all that, you're going to get smacked in the mouth by Reshizard.
A turn 1 full blitz just doesn't really cut it, which is crazy to say because Pikarom has been so aggressive that it just wins games on turn 1 full blitzes alone.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, again, Reshizard it's just too fast, honestly, for Pikarom. It's going to hit that 260 or at least 230, which is enough pressure in itself right off the bat. And I don't think Pikarom can really keep up with that.
I think its only saving grace might be that it can play Let Loose effectively, and that could kind of stall out a Reshizard player. But if they even think about drawing out of that Let Loose, then it's probably still over for you.
Yeah. Which is what we had discussed earlier, how badly does Marshadow affect Reshizard, which we've already touched base on, but Pikarom does have that option, and that could be its only saving grace for Pikarom.
It also seems like it could have an incredibly unfavorable price trade against Baby Blacephalon. I mean, they don't even need to get off more than 2 or 3 attacks, and they can spend all game trying to do that, and it won't really hurt their strategy.
Yep.
They're just trying to trade favorably and take big knockouts.
Yep. The best option for Pikarom, is it Turbo or is it Toolbox?
I can't say I've really played around with either of the variants enough to know. The toolbox version seems to be more consistent off of Let Loose's as it plays Jirachis. So that inherently is going to make your Let Loose plays easier. And with Let Loose being an important factor against Reshizard, I think a Jirachi based build may be the way to go instead of more of an order pad version we saw Andrew Mahone play.
Sure. I'd have to probably agree with that. It's kind of up in the air. Like Kobe had said, I haven't really played around a whole lot with Pikarom. I did test it once at a cup, didn't end up doing very great. So I kind of put the deck down for a while, and I'm curious to see on how it ends up in this new format with Unbroken Bonds coming out. Moving on from Pikarom, we're going to Malamar. Can it keep up again like Pikarom in this new format?
Yeah, I think it suffers a lot of the same issues, and we've seen with Pikarom's continued success and upward trend in play that Malamar's just kind of fallen off the radar a little bit as it can't already keep up with Pikarom, let alone the aggressive monster Reshizard is. You could try to go one prize against it, but I think they may just be able to target you down way too fast. What do you think?
You know, Malamar's never really stuck out to me. It is a good deck. It has good options. It hits hard. But, can it keep up? No, I don't think so. We haven't really seen it actually show out a whole lot this season anyways. It's kind of just been that kind of middleman, I guess you'd say, in all the format. It beats Zoroark, but it doesn't really beat Pikarom, and it's just kind of all over the place, really.
Yeah, it seems to be like the slowest of the big blow-up decks.
Yeah.
Like, it can't ever really keep up with Pikarom. It takes a few more turns to get going against Blounds. So I think Reshizard would just be the same story.
Well, and the blow up decks like we're talking about, Malamar it takes stage ones pretty much to set it up and make it blow up. Whereas Reshizard, we're going back to Reshizard, but it just needs its welder, it just needs some attachments. I mean, it's going off all the time. And I just don't think Malamar can keep up with that.
Yeah, definitely would struggle to deal with the turn 1 Kiawe. And if you are wanting to pick up Malamar and you think it'd be strong for this format, I would definitely advise cutting a lot of the text. The Mars Shadow at this point can definitely go. The GX, not the Let Loose,
Yes.
because the Let Loose might be your only way to slow down Reshizard. But I'd up your switch counts to get into that Ultra Necrozma early, play a high ball count. And in this format, with Let Loose being so prevalent, I'd play a high ball count in just about any deck you're going to play, especially with all these stage 1s going into something like Zoroark. I think a ball count in the high numbers is still going to be very important.
Yeah, and like you said, cutting the Mars Shadow GX is almost what you have to do at this point. And then as well as, if you haven't already put 2 Mars Shadow Let Looses in there, just because it's going to make you more consistent, it's going to get your Let Loose off quicker, it's going to hurt Reshizard, it's going to hurt, pretty much every other deck.
I'm not sure if Malamar can really afford the bench space for 2 Let Loose. I understand it as far as consistency and seeing it, but if you do want to go towards 2 Let Loose, I would think about cutting the Jirachi, as that's usually taking the bench space a second Let Loose would. But in general, Malamar also struggles to draw out of Let Loose a little bit, so I'd be careful if you do add that Malamar to add just more consistency in ball cards.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on from Malamar, we're going to go on to Zapdos. Kobe has tested a lot of Zapdos, so we're pretty much going to give him the mic here and let him talk about Zapdos.
Yeah, I've kind of been flip-flopping between Zapdos and Zoroark this season, as they're both fairly aggressive decks with high skill cap that if you play well, then you can win games. At the beginning of the season, I was liking a straight Zapdos variant that just, tried to draw consistently every game, and it did the job, but I found that it was just losing to Zoroark game after game after game, because if you could not target down the muck, then you just couldn't deal enough damage. I've tested a couple other versions. I've tested Lycanroc and Beasts, but my favorite version has probably so far been the Buzzwole version, as it can hit those Pikaroms for the exact numbers and Zoroarks. It's just a very versatile deck that can deal with muck a lot better. That being said, I'm not sure if that would be the way to go in a Reshiram heavy format, as the Reshiram kind of just doesn't care about Buzzwoles. Buzzwole does 120. Unless you high roll a Beast Energy, you're not going to even be two-shotting a Buzzwole, Reshizard, sorry.
And that's what I was going to say about Zapdos, is what you're saying is it's just so versatile. You can put a lot of partners with it, and it's just insane. Over the course of the meta before Unbroken Bonds has been released, we've seen so many variants and so many successful variants at that. And I'd like to see kind of what we have here is new potential partners coming out of Unbroken Bonds for Zapdos, and something we might see that just completely switches the meta up again with Zapdos.
Definitely, and I haven't really dived too deep into what those new potential partners can be, but I've been thinking about some of the old ones, and I think the Beast version could be even stronger than it's already proven to be, as Nihilego can be really strong against Reshizard, hitting for some really cool numbers and getting some really critical knockouts at times.
And how do you feel Zapdos handles Reshizard, even if you're not running, Nihilego or anything of that sort?
I think we can probably, if we get the variant down, find a great way to trade against Reshizard. I mean, Zapdos has always been good at trading with tag teams. That's kind of been its highlight. You got to kill 3 Zapdos to equal a tag team, and Zapdos can usually 2-shot a tag team. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just all about finding the right partners. And more than Reshizard, I'm concerned about Baby Blounce, as the 120 HP is a real awkward number for Zapdos to get over.
Yeah, the Baby Blounce matchup seems decent. I think it just kind of it's probably about a 50-50, I'd say.
Yeah, because you both need quite a bit of resources to kill the other, but Baby Blounce, if they just get hands full of energies and welders, can probably just run you right over more than you could them.
Yeah. We're gonna move on from our kind of top picks and kind of go into what our early decks are, what we're testing, what we're thinking is gonna be good in the meta. For myself, I've been testing a bit of Buzzwole and Pheromosa. I just think that combo after your opponent goes down to 3 prize cards with the Beast Rings, and I think you can do a 6 prize turn after that.
Yes, on tag teams or with the new tool Beast Springer,
Yeah.
which I see a lot of Buzz Pheromosa lists cutting, but as all we really care about with that deck is the turn that we want to Beast Game, I think it could be a really valuable tool in the deck. I think it could potentially deal with Reshizard, as it can just hit such a strong combo to take all 6 prizes at once that you really don't care about the weakness. But Baby Blounce seems like an almost impossible matchup, don't you think?
Yeah. And, we've been seeing the hype of Baby Blounce. We've been, on Hey Fonte and a few other pages and just kind of been seeing what the hype about Baby Blounce is. And it's kind of up in the air, honestly, right now, I think. There was a good poll on Hey Fonte the other day about whether we'd see a lot of Baby Blounce or if we want it. It's just going to be interesting to see. If Baby Blounce isn't expected as much as we thought, Buzzwole Pheromosa might have a place in the meta coming up. Again, I don't know how it handles Reshizard, but I think if you can get that combo off, for the 6 prize turn, you're going to be sitting pretty good.
Yeah, I'm looking at these lists here. I see a couple cards that I don't quite agree with. A lot of the Japanese lists have been playing Custom Catcher, but as all we care about is that turn that your opponent kills your first Buzz Pheromosa, I think Counter Catcher is just a strict upgrade and frees up a ton of deck building space for you to really just hit your green searches, really just play Lieutenant Surge when you need to, and hit your Lucamines. You want to hit your Beast Strings, so anything that'll make you draw into those cards, I would kind of just strip the techs that you feel are unnecessary.
Yeah. And we've seen, I've done a lot of testing of Buzzwole Pheromosa, and it's pretty dang consistent. I mean, any deck that has 4 Pokegear in it, I think is going to be pretty dang alright for its supporter count. You got your greens. Lucamine Prism Star is going to be incredibly important when you drop down to that, when your opponent drops down to that 3 prize turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's gonna help you a lot, and your setting up as well.
It basically buys you just an extra turn to hit your 190 attack before you go into Beast Game.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the top techs I've been considering to kind of help with your 1 prize matchups would be Kukui. After a couple jet punches, a Kukui can really just make your Beast Game get over the line you need it to get to.
Yep.
But overall, I think it's a pretty risky meta call with so much fire around. It can still just kind of get ran over by those decks.
Yeah. Moving on from Buzzwole Pheromosa, something that Kobe and I have been testing quite a bit and put a lot of thought into is the single prize dark deck or Hoopa Umbreon that some of you have may seen already. With the new Spiritomb coming out of Unbroken Bonds. If you're unfamiliar with what the Spiritomb does, every turn you can add 1 damage counter to it. And its attack is 1 dark energy, and it reads 30 plus 30 for each damage counter you have on this Pokemon. Pretty much what that's going to do for you, it's going to help you handle your other single prize decks better. It could also clutch out some GXs for you. But we've just kind of started putting this deck together about the last week and kind of testing it out, and I'll let Kobe talk on it a little bit more.
Yeah, so there are a couple problems with the deck. It is not perfect, but the main thing that I'm liking is that it has a lot of great positive matchups as long as it can draw well, and the deck is just pumped with consistency, so it aims to do that every turn. Spiritomb will really help, as in my testing right now, I'm finding that when your opponent can't knock out something, that Umbreon kind of just doesn't get the damage done, and Hoopa really just can't get there either. So Spiritomb will really help in those situations. Some techs I've been considering are damage modifiers to help get over the line against these beatdown decks that can kind of just run you over before you get started. Things like Choice Band or even something like Hustle Belt for a Spiritomb. I've been debating whether Devoured Field or Shrine of Punishment is best in the deck. But Chandler's got a little bit more testing on it, so we'll hear his opinions.
Yeah, my big thing that I actually came to Kobe with was whether Devoured was more important than Shrine. In my testing, I'm finding that Devoured is far more important than Shrine, just so you can hit your Tapu Koko Prism, because in the matchup of the Pikarom, that's pretty much Pikarom's answer to Hoopa. It's its answer to, pretty much your whole deck is that Tapu Koko. Once you take care of that Tapu Koko, they can't really do much. They knock out that Umbreon next, and then you just stick out a Hoopa the rest of the game, and what do they really do? They need 2 Electro Powers with their Zapdos to knock out the Hoopa, and that's just, that's asking a lot.
Another problem I found with the deck is it doesn't have a ton of early game pressure. Like turn 1 and 2, you really won't be doing a whole lot of damage, and it can kind of get a little confusing and tough what you should start with. And you don't want to go like so heavy on the Umbreons and Spiritombs that your Hoopas can just be avoided. But you don't want to use your Hoopas so early that they get taken care of by your opponent's non-GX threats early.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to mention too, is how do they take care of the Hoopas? And Muck hurts this deck a lot. It hurts this deck a lot. It takes out your Spiritomb moves. You pretty much, your Spiritomb's useless. Hoopa barely has any viability once they play that Muck. The hardest part I've been having with this deck is it plays Counter Catcher. It plays a 2-of Counter Catcher. And just kind of comboing that Counter Catcher and Umbreon play. I've been testing it a lot online, which isn't the most viable option, but I can never just seem to get that Counter Catcher Umbreon play on that Muck. And that's what's been hurting this deck the most, I think, is the fact that they have that option to Muck, and if Muck's going to stay heavy in this new format, then that's going to be a problem for this deck, I believe.
Yeah, and maybe we consider a 4th Umbreon as we're only playing 3. That could help us draw into it a lot more naturally, help us be a lot more lenient and versatile with our stretchers, as we're already playing 2, as we want to stream Umbreon as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah, and the 3 of Umbreon, I have noticed that it is a little hurtful. We even run 2 Stretcher, and it almost seems like you're not looping your Umbreons enough in situations where you want to be constantly looping the Umbreons.
Yeah, that attack for 120 or 130 really just hits the numbers you want it to.
Yeah, you can 2-shot a Reshizard, you can 2-shot a Pikarom. Umbreon just is a huge impactful card in that deck, and it's completely necessary. So I'm thinking a 4 of Umbreon is probably going to be necessary.
You actually won't be able to 2-shot the Reshizard. It has 270 HP.
Oh, it has 270?
270.
Okay, okay.
So that's something you will want to take note of.
Yeah. So that might be something you tech in, maybe, like he was saying, the Hustle Belts, or at that point you may want to go with the Choice Bands. Or, there's tons of damage modifiers out there that you could think of. But
yeah, absolutely.
Moving on from that, well, actually, I'd like to touch base on one more deck. We have talked very little about the Melmetal Lucario with the Bronzong as a stall deck, kind of a interim wacky schmacky. I haven't taken a whole lot of interest into it, but if Reshizard is super heavy in this next format, I think it could be a viable stall deck.
Yeah, definitely. And Stall has proven itself to be strong, and it's just getting more tools now with Power Plant and Surge, really making the deck work even better than it already has.
Absolutely. Now that we have the access to Surge for the stall decks, that's just going to make stall decks and mill decks that much more insane. Kind of leading into that with the Lieutenant Surge, we're going to go into Expanded and how this new set is going to affect Expanded. My call is that Lieutenant Surge is going to get instantly banned in the Expanded format.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any way that this card makes it past even one regional. I mean, the combos with the already insane pool of cards that Stall has and Expanded and the insane pool of cards Zoroark has just makes it seem like an absolutely degenerate card in Expanded. Pair this with things like Seismitoad, pair this with things like Trevenant, and you're really in for a tough game sometimes.
Yeah, and again with the mill, you have Lieutenant Surge, you got the Rockets, you can play 2 Rockets. Lusamine has been banned, and that is a little unfortunate. I've always been a mill or stall player in Expanded. But again, you have Team Rockets, you have Plumeria, all these sort of denial cards and supporters for Lieutenant Surge to be paired with.
And even things just like In and then a Colress
Absolutely.
can be, while you draw 16 cards, you're limiting your opponent to just 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many combinations that we still have yet to think about, and the option or the opportunities, I guess I should say, are almost unlimited in the Expanded format.
Yeah. And how do you see this obviously powerful new standard archetype, Reshizard, fitting in and Expanded?
I think it's going to be a similar thing like Pikarom. They're going to pretty much shove Max Elixirs down its throat. You're still probably going to see you're going to see Blacksmith for sure, probably. Maybe paired with Salazzle. I'm not real familiar with a whole lot of fire good cards and Expanded, but I think you might see it with Salazzle just so that Blacksmith is a little bit more viable.
Well, let's not forget about Welder, of course.
Yeah, and that's why I think Blacksmith might be more handy in the Expanded format, just because you have the option to, if you get crazy and maybe want to Battle Compressor some fire energies away, and then Blacksmith, or like I said, Salazzle, and then Blacksmith. I just think it's going to be a similar version of Pikarom.
Yeah, and with things like Battle Compressor, Max Elixir, Welder, Blacksmith, and Kiawe, you can really explode turn 1 like even Pikarom can't.
Yeah.
The only thing I might be concerned about for the deck in Expanded is the pool of water cards is slightly better than the pool of fighting cards that could counter Pikarom.
Absolutely, and I think that's where maybe Seismitoad becomes viable again. They don't have access to the items cards, but they do pretty much. Reshizard functions off of supporters. It functions off of its Kiawes, its Blacksmiths, its Welders, all that. And
yeah, so even if the Reshizard player just hits their turn 1 Kiawe, that could spell a lot of trouble for a Seismitoad.
Absolutely.
Whereas something like an Archie's could probably handle it pretty easily.
Yeah, that is right. And I think Archie's is going to make its way back into, it hasn't really gone out, but be back in the format and stay consistent, strong through the Expanded format. And, moving on from there, Power Plant and Expanded. I think it's huge. You have Zoroark, which is always played and Expanded.
You have things like Rayquaza. Pikarom still plays a lot of abilities, such as Tapu Koko GX, Xurkitree GX at times, even things like Zeraora GX can be huge shutting that off.
Yep. Shaman, it shuts off Shaman as well.
Yeah, Tapu Lele, Dedenne GX. It's going to be weird to see how that fits in along a card like Silent Lab that has filled that role for so long.
Yep. It's just going to be interesting to see the Expanded format. Like I said, I think Reshizard is going to be very familiar to the Pikarom, and how they pretty much just turbo the crap out of that Pikarom. But moving on from there, we want to talk about kind of the Japanese results that we've been seeing from the Unbroken Barn format. So going back here to the most recent Japanese tournament, we are looking at Kyoto. And let's just kind of go over the top 8 here. We're looking at Reshizard in first, Regigigas Hoopa in second, Sylveon Gardevoir in fourth, Reshizard again in fourth. The previous one was third. Zapdos in fifth. Hoopa Umbreon, I didn't realize it placed this high, was sixth. Reshizard was seventh, and Blacephalon Naganadel was eighth.
Yeah, and Blacephalon's kind of one of the decks that we failed to talk about when we were talking about decks, but honestly, I'm not sure how it can keep up with these other one-shot decks. It's kind of found its place in Standard, but even with Pikarom being so dominant, it can't keep up at times.
We do see Zoroark right under 8th place. That's something I have been consistently playing throughout this season. It's just consistent. It hits hard. It does what it needs to. It's gotten me pretty much the most points I could out of this quarter 3. And I'm thinking about probably testing it some more for the Unbroken Bonds format, like we had talked earlier, especially with that Slowking coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I looked through the rest of the top results from Japan, it was cut to a top 64. There are some interesting decks that slip in. Guardy Sylveon's one that we haven't really touched on. I'm not really a big believer in the deck. I find it to be slow and can't handle either Pikarom or Reshizard. And I think in a format like this, that'll cause some huge problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kobe and I have talked a little bit about Gardevoir Sylveon. Again, I just think it's slow, like he had mentioned earlier. Looking at this top 64, it is Reshizard heavy, and I mean, it's insane how much Reshizard's in this top 64, which is why we're kind of giving our prediction as to how heavy Reshizard's going to be in the, every other format besides the Japanese one. So, yeah, any other thoughts about the Japanese
Yeah, there's
results?
a couple other decks that come in here. There's a Lycanroc deck that comes in with the new Landorus card.
Yep.
The Landorus kind of does the same thing as a Buzzwole GX would do, but on a one prizer. It has really efficient attacks, does 30 to one of your opponent's bench, and can do 60 and move damage.
So,
I don't think this card can really keep up with any of the other one prize decks, and I think it probably just slipped in off good matchups.
yeah. And looking at a lot of these Japanese lists as well, you're seeing Reset Stamp, which I believe we won't be seeing until rotation. That is a card I am very much looking forward to, but it is sad that we will not get it before Worlds happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking actually at...
Another thing to note while he's doing this about cards we won't see until rotation, we actually do not have another expanded event that will be in this new Unbroken Bonds format until next season, which means we have a whole nother set coming out, so Reshizard could actually decrease in hype by then.
Well, we do have Hartford coming up. Will Unbroken Bonds be legal for that event?
No, Hartford is our current standard format.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple of the other decks that slipped in here would be a Whimsicott GX deck. Kind of slow, kind of reliant on your opponent hitting tails. Not something I really like. There's a Wheezing archetype, which is a spread archetype. Wheezing has an ability that has basically a Shrine of Punishment type effect, doing 10 damage to each of your opponent's basic Pokemon in between turns. And its attack for a colorless energy does 40 and 20 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon with damage counters already on them. So if you're a spread player, that could be something definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else to say about any of these decks?
I saw the Zoroark Dugong. That's been interesting. Kobe and I have talked a little bit about that. I think that Dugong's going to be something where you're going to be utilizing triple acceleration energy quite a bit. You might run a couple of water energy in there, or whatever type of energy you want to run. Maybe you run it alongside the Lycanroc like you do with the Slowking. But that is interesting to see, that Zoroark Dugong. I believe the Dugong does it do 60 damage to 2 Pokemon?
60 to 2,
Yep. So that's pretty interesting. I don't know if the spread is better than Slowking's just straight up power hit. That's going to be interesting to see between those two water Pokemon, which one's going to be better of the two.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think we're going to wrap things up here. If you guys have any input or anything like that, go ahead and go to our page, Team No Leek, and go ahead and hit a like while you're there. Again, I am Chandler with my buddy Kobe.
Thanks for talking to us, guys.
Yep, take it easy.